Hi friends, and welcome to the very first episode of Be Gay, Make History, a podcast focused on sharing the history of the LGBTQ+ community. My name is Joe Bushey, and I will be your host as we explore the history of the community. And you may know me from my TikTok page where I go by PhotoJojo because every June I share a 30 days worth of Pride history. I can tell you that I never saw myself as the next white guy with a microphone starting a podcast, but several of my TikTok followers wanted a more expansive view on the topics that I've covered, and my husband pushed me to do it, so here we are. But to really dive into the how and why this podcast got started, we need to look back about 10 years. I was a sophomore in my undergraduate program at Black Hills State University, and I had decided to go to my first Gay Straight Alliance meeting. Now, just a quick clarifying detail, I had been out as a gay man since my junior year of high school. So this first GSA meeting that I joined, I went in not knowing what was happening within the club itself, and I actually had come to the meeting where they were electing new officers for the club. The officers were all seniors that year, and they were graduating, so of course they needed to bring new people in. The club had been pretty small up until this point, and when I got there, it was myself, the officers, and nobody else. So I know that it will come as a major shock when I tell you that I was elected as the new president for the Gay Straight Alliance for the next year. Now, of course, I didn't just get it by default. They actually sat and explained to me what it was needed, and I was actually excited to take on the role. Now, fast forward to the next year, I'd gotten my feet under me as the president and started to grow the club. And we had two advisors, Professor Gibson and Professor Kirk. Now, Professor Kirk was one of my favorite history teachers. She's had some really great courses that I'd enjoyed. And there was a point where she and I were sitting down and talking about history, because I'm a nerd when it comes to history. And she was asking me questions that were specific to the LGBTQ community. And I'm ashamed to say that at the time, I didn't know. And it bothered me enough that I actually brought it up to the other members of the club, who were at about 35 members at this point. And it was basically a consensus that we didn't know a lot of the history about our community. This realization actually prompted me, along with the other members and the backing of both Professor Gibson and Professor Kirk, to start a Gay History Month at our college. And the first year was a real success. We did events and we had speakers come in throughout the month. And as I was learning more about our community, I finally realized that there were two major reasons why many of us didn't know our history. We know that in at least modern history that both religious and non-religious groups have tried to eradicate any information, history, knowledge, science about our community. And so the first reason is that much of our history has passed on orally. And the second reason ties into the first reason, because if your history is passed on orally and you lose most of or almost all of a generation who would be passing that knowledge on, then it doesn't get passed on. And that's what happened during the 80s and 90s during the AIDS pandemic. We lost almost a whole generation of men and women who would have passed on that knowledge orally. 31,120 people had passed away from HIV and AIDS by the 1990s. But that's something we will be covering in an upcoming episode. So getting back to the Gay History Month at my college, as I learned more and as I watched my members learn more about our history, I saw this hunger to know even more. Now, of course, that continued throughout the next 2 years while I was president of the GSA. Now, fast forward to 2020 at the height of the COVID pandemic. Like many of us who were stuck at home, I joined TikTok, and my main thing was I was sharing information and history about photography. That's my day job besides being a history nerd. But as my following started to grow, I realized that I enjoyed teaching people about things. And so I started a series called Pride History during the month of June for Pride Month. When I started that series in 2022, I didn't realize how much it was going to blow up. Over that first month of June, I went from probably about 30,000 followers to 70,000 followers. And since continuing this project every year, I now currently sit at 105,000 followers on TikTok. A majority of them are there for this series. And again, I see that want for this knowledge, and having it being accessible is really important. And like I said, with the prompting of a few or more of my followers and a push from my husband, Be Gay, Make History was born. So what can you expect from Be Gay, Make History? First, I will be covering both the good and the bad that happened in our history. I will talk about people you may not know or who you might know who changed the world around them and did it while they were being gay. And I will be bringing in a diverse group of people to interview who have varying life stories and backgrounds and interesting stories to share. And with that, I will try my damnedest to make sure that my sources and resources come from places that don't just play into the whitewashed version of our history. And with that in mind, if I ever make a mistake in the information that I'm sharing or say something wrong, please let me know, because I want to correct the history if I get it wrong. So if any of that sounded interesting to you, make sure you follow along, because for episode 2, we're going to be talking about how pride in the United States and the LGBTQ movement in the United States would not be where it is today without trans women of color and lesbians of color. So as this first episode comes to an end, I want to end it by reminding you that you living and thriving as a part of the LGBTQ community is making history. So keep doing that shit.